Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today, I am really excited to introduce you to B. Michael Stevens, the author of the Goddess Gambit. And this is a crazy urban fantasy with like post-apocalyptic stuff going on. Hi, thank you for joining us, Ben.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, you have to tell me how this whole came about. So you work in an oil field, is that correct?
That's correct. When I wrote this book, I was an oil field technician, and now I'm a oil field coordinator. So I work in the office, but for the same company. And I'm currently at work right now out in West Texas, and we've had jobs going out the door all morning, drilling rigs, oil and gas, and it's been crazy, but it's a great job. It's very demanding. I work a lot of hours, but it pays the bills, right? And I've managed to find the time to write at work, in my truck, at my lunch break, while I'm on a drilling rig. If I have 5 minutes, I just pull out the laptop and write a scene or edit or whatever you got to do.
Wow. Can you describe what it looks like in the oil field when you're in a truck or you're on a drilling rig?
Well, yeah, it's a pretty crazy scene. I think a lot of people have an image in their mind of what Texas looks like, and if they are picturing tumbleweeds and large flat expanses as far as the eye can see, and you see those little pump jacks with the head that just goes back and forth, all that, and then at night, the drilling rigs all over the horizon, all you can see is the flames lighting up the clouds, like the flare stack comes off the clouds, and you can just see fires all over the place. It's pretty surreal. It's like being on an alien world. And I've worked in the oil fields of Alaska and West Africa offshore platforms, and taken helicopters to work, snow machines to work, hovercrafts to work, and you just go to some wild, remote places, and it really feels like sometimes you're working on the moon.
Wow, you can definitely see how that would influence this story.
Guilty.
It's amazing. I love the details. I love the world that you created. There's military action, so it's like a military sci-fi mixed with an urban fantasy, and great characters, great background build-up. How did all
Thank
that
you.
come about?
Well, believe it or not, this story and the sequels that are coming are all based off a story, like a bedtime story, if you will, that I told my son when he was about 10 years old. And I grew up playing.
10
Yeah,
nighttime story? Really? Oh no. Okay,
yeah.
good.
Well, the finished product is a little darker, a little bit more gritty than it was when he was a kid, but it is directly based off the story. And I grew up playing role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. And so when I tell him a story, I made it interactive. He is the character of the story, and I would describe to him a situation and ask him, okay, well, how do you respond to the stimulus? What is your reaction to what you do? And then his decisions essentially helped shape the story. So it was like a choose your own adventure, if you will, that I just kind of winged up the seat of my pants to him. And I was working in the oil field then. And the thing is, the oil field guys, we work away from our families. We're gone for long periods of time. When you come home, that family time is super precious. So it was always something very special for me and him to do when I came home, and he looked forward to it. And it just became this story. And I promised him that one day I would make it into a book, and I have. And so I'm very excited about that.
Wow. How old is he now?
19.
Oh, he must love this book now.
Yeah,
Totally
it took me a
works.
long time to get started. Yeah, it took me a long time to get started. I didn't actually start writing it until about 2016, and we finished it last year, and we waited to publish a year so we would have sequels be able to come out a little closer. Try to, we shot for a rapid release, didn't quite happen, but they're still coming. The book two is coming out in like 2 weeks, and book three will be out later this year.
Wow. Yeah, you intertwined a little hope punk into this, and I love one of the lead female characters who I love the vengeance in it.
Lucy,
You lose
the
say.
yeah, the skeleton. Yes, very good. No spoilers, right? But
No
yeah,
spoilers.
she's definitely one of my favorite characters, and I got her name from my pet Chihuahua, who is kind of the epitome of that character, if you will. She's this fierce little Chihuahua dog, and I was like, that's my warrior woman right there.
Wow. Do a lot of women work on the oil fields or very few?
Not, more and more. 20 years ago, not so much. Now you see it quite frequently. I've even seen them on the drilling rig floors as roughnecks. I worked with one in offshore Africa, brilliant technician. I think she's working in Canada now. And you see a lot of women engineers, a lot of HSE, like health safety, environmental, technicians, and truck drivers, torque and test. You see more and more. It's definitely a different environment than it was 20 years ago.
You definitely wrote really strong female characters. So I was wondering what influenced that.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I'm not really sure. I've always been a big fan,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't. I like there's I like tropes, but I like changing them. Like for example, it's urban fantasy, but it's urban fantasy set in the future. So what if? And so I did the same thing with the female tropes. Lucy is a bit of a femme fatale, but I wanted to change that up a little bit. And Maya is more of a classical woman, kind of epitome of a mother and then a young girl at the same time. I've had strong women figures in my life. I was raised by a single parent mother. I got to visit my dad. He's still, and spend time with him. But I lived with my mom primarily, and I'm married to a beautiful, wonderful woman. I've been married to her for 22 years, and she is not a conventional woman, but she is an inspiration to me. So, that's a big part of it.
Great. Now, what about the city and the shanty and all of these military elements? What influenced you in that area?
Well, I told you before, I grew up playing role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. There is there's a role-playing game that's still around, but I played it in the 80s and 90s when I was a kid, and it's called Shadowrun, and it's an urban fantasy set in the future, and that was a big influence on this. Where it was this idea, kind of like a Blade Runner setting, where you have these mega corporations, this huge city with advanced technology, but in the shadows of the city, you have elves and orcs and maybe even a dragon sleeping underneath the city. So it's the blending of fantasy elements and science fiction elements, and I've always had a soft spot for that because it just seems so cool. It's like the best of both worlds. And honestly, if science fiction writers want to be really honest with themselves, most of what we enjoy as science fiction is really fantasy. The Expanse is a television show right now, and there's a series of books out. That's hard sci-fi, and it's based on science, like The Martian, the movie The Martian, right? That was pure science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars is more like fantasy. You've got magic. They call it the Force, but it's magic. And the aliens are different creatures. They might as well be an elf or an orc or a fairy or whatever you can think of. It's a fairy tale fantasy rule set in a futuristic setting. I
Wow.
like it.
I loved it. I
Well,
couldn't put
thank
it
you.
down. Takes about
That's fantastic.
no, it took like 8 or 9 hours to read and kept me up till like 3 in the morning one night. So,
I love it. I love it. I think that's probably a record. It's
uh,
fantastic.
well, it's just that you're like racing through it with them. It's really adrenaline pumping.
Cool. I like that. Yeah, it comes from a lot of that role playing game again. My friends that read it that I still game with, they said, "Oh, this is like a role playing game because you have to have that action." And I try to in my chapters with like little micro cliffhangers, to make you want to keep turning those pages. And I've learned a lot along the way, how to let your characters fail, and every time they succeed at something, they have to have two more things wrong happen. So it's like this constant struggle, and yeah, I wanted to get it just pumping like that.
It is. And you didn't go crazy with details or descriptives about where they were. It was just really drawn out in such a way that the reader could just imagine everything and you could place yourself there. Like you're on that chase, you're trying to get away from the bad guys, or when they were confronting bad guys, or going through the garbage thing. Everything made sense. It was so like realistic. Yes.
I appreciate that. A lot of the actual settings come from research I do. I like to take vacation. It's one of the benefits of working in the oil field. It pays pretty good. And so once a year, I take my family somewhere different. It was important for me to think, I want my son to see more than just America, because we have it so good here. And when I worked in West Africa, I got to see what the rest of the world looked like. And I want him to experience that because it's so educational. So we travel to places like Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Jerusalem, Italy, and all these places that we go. I start going, hey, this is cool, and a lot of the stuff in Goddess Gambit, more so in the next two sequels, came from the things that I saw and learned about when I was in Belize and Guatemala and Mexico. Lucy, very Mexican character. Maya is a Mexican goddess, Mayan goddess. And one of the things that really caught my eye when I was down there in a city called Tulum on the Yucatan Peninsula was like, I don't call it graffiti. It was more like a mural, like beautiful artwork on the side of a building. And it had this, this Mayan god in his full regalia, with the leopard and the jaguar and the feathers and the, Aztec warrior, Mayan warrior god. And he was in a spaceship. They'd drawn him in a spaceship, and if you look at the mythology, the feathered god, the feathered serpent, told the people that he was going to leave and come back. And unfortunately, when the Spaniards came, they thought it was their god returning. They thought the conqueror was their god returning, which didn't work out so well for them. But I liked the idea. I was like, oh, wow, so there's a little bit of ancient alien stuff going on. Or is the goddess an alien? You read the book, so you know that there's a lot of these creatures coming from other dimensions that are magical beings, but they're also aliens. So it's that perfect blend of sci-fi and fantasy. But it was definitely inspired by the mythology and the culture of Mexico and Belize and everything I saw there, and it really got the creative juices going, if you will. And even some of the places, the locales, we went diving in cenotes and walking through the jungle, and I said, okay, this is going in the book, And so those details that you talked about, a lot of them are from real life, things that I've seen and experienced working all over the world in the oil field. So it's been a blessing. I'm very lucky.
Definitely. How long do you have to stay in the oil field between breaks with your family?
Well, when I was working overseas, I was gone for a month, and then I'd be home for a month. So it was actually kind of cool. It's hard to be away for your family for 4 weeks, but when you come home, you got a 4-week vacation every 2 months. Right now, my situation in Texas is a little different because I'm closer to home. I'm only about 5 hours from my house. I work for 20 days straight, and then I go home for 10 days.
Oh, wow. That's really hard. Not
yeah,
bad, I guess.
It's not bad. We're used to it. I've been doing this for about 14 years.
Well, is it safer in the industry now than it was, 20 years ago?
Absolutely. They say right now the most dangerous thing that we do is drive on the public highway.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. Statistically, most of the injuries, oil field related injuries, happen on public highways. Excuse me. So they've really changed the industry as far as putting safety first.
Oh, that's great. But you can definitely see a lot of the elements that you described about the oil field and seeing the fire on the horizon. those elements definitely come into play. It's so unique and well done. I was really impressed. I couldn't,
Thank you.
you know, when you read fantasy, sometimes you can say, oh, yeah, I know where they took this from. Or, yeah, it's kind of like that show. This is like nothing else. It was great. It was
That's what I was
totally
shooting for.
new, fresh adventure.
Cool. Cool. I'm glad you felt that way. That was exactly what I was going for. Is you know, I probably could have written to market and delivered something, you know, the next werewolf vampire romance or you know, whatever that's really hot and sold a lot more copies. But I just had to write the book I wanted to write. I had to do something new. Well, it's not exactly new. Like I said, that Shadowrun has done it and things like that. There's Chris
Right.
Fox has done the blend, but it's definitely newer because, for example, Amazon doesn't have a genre called science fantasy. So I'm like, well, how am I supposed to label this? You know, so that part has been challenging. But I think once people like yourself have read it and appreciate, oh wow, I've never seen anything like this. Maybe it'll pick up some traction, you know, and we can build on it. I have plans to expand the universe. I'm gonna there's gonna be four books in the series, and then 2 more supplemental books, like a collection of short stories set in the world, and then a novella about a different character entirely unrelated to the events of the Goddess Gambit, but set in the same world. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. But I can definitely see the elements of the oil fields now that you described it. It fits in so
Absolutely.
well.
You remember the scene when they are sneaking into into the ziggurat, and there's pipes and there's workers working on the pipes, and he breaks the pipe with his hammer to distract them so they can sneak in and rescue the goddess. That was in a mental image of where I work. It was like, oh yeah, I just, you know, that was the BBLT platform off the coast of Angola. So
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So, what did your son think of the story when he was 10 versus 19?
wow. He actually admitted to me that when I finished the book, that he didn't remember. He goes, I don't remember the story very much. You know, I was like, well, yeah, he was 10. I can expect that. But then as he started reading it, he's like, oh yeah, that did I remember now. So a lot of it he had forgotten, and because it took me so long to fulfill my promise to him. But as he read it, he was like, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember that. And I don't know if he remembers, and I haven't told him yet. I'm waiting to see. But there's no spoilers.
Okay.
But something happens. Something happens in the 4th and final book, and when I was doing this with him when he was 10, he actually cried. He kind of turned away, you know, like he's a tough kid, you know. Turned away. Didn't want to show me that he was crying, but I was like, wow. So I hope that I'd be able to do the same thing to the readers 10 years later. You know, of course he was invested, and I hope that the readers, if they follow along all the way to 4th book, they'll be invested too. And I've come to know and love these characters as if they were real people. So, and I want that for my readers.
Yeah, no, as one of your readers who's going to be really loyal, I can totally see that. They're all really
Cool.
human people that make mistakes and, you know, start to look at the world in a different way once they go out of their comfort zone and discover more about what's going on in the world. And they start to understand things better. And I think that's amazing. You know, I think it
You know,
shows. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, but you're right. I just wanted to say when I was first writing this, it was when the migrant Syrian the issue in Syria was really happening, and the Syrian refugees were fleeing what was going on in the Middle East and coming into Europe, and that was a strong influence on the situation in this book, right? You know, with the outsiders coming in trying to seek refuge, but then being forced to stick in the shanty. And then, you know, there's the elements of fascism and nationalism and empathy and, you know, all of that current events that were going on and are still going on were influencing me as I put this together, you know, and I thought, okay, this was a way to like you said, show people can learn that things aren't everything that they thought they were. Things are different. They're more complicated than black and white, and that even though you might be an alien, you're still capable of feeling the same way I am. You're different than me. We're not the same, but we're equal but different. So
Right. And I thought that was a great theme throughout the story. Not something that you'd see in Blade Running, but you draw the reader into really realizing what it's like to travel away from your comfort zone and learn about other people. What's the real story? Why is the power so centralized in one area?
right,
And who's really who's the terrorist? Who's the bad guy? It made a
right.
lot of sense, and I think it'll inspire people to travel and ask more questions.
Traveling. I think it was Mark Twain that said that something about traveling being able to shatter any misconceptions you might have had. It's the most educational thing you can do. Honestly, you can read books, and I suggest you read books, but a single trip is worth 1,000 books, and that's when I started writing this for real in 2015, 2016, and I was still working in West Africa at the time, which was an incredible experience. I'm so happy, so thankful that I was able to work there. I miss it every day. I made friends there, and when I was on that platform, I felt like I was on the Starship Enterprise, not only because of the high technology around me, but of the diversity of the crew. This casing hand was from Pakistan. This mud engineer was from South Africa. He was an Afrikaner, Dutch. And my coworker, he's a local from Angola. Our boss is from London. And it's like being on the Starship Enterprise, where you've got all these different characters from all these different places, and then despite all their differences and cultural differences and different senses of humor, different diets, we come together as a team and make the impossible happen. Like some of these things that we did were like moon landings. We drilled a pipeline underneath the Congo River, 2 different platforms, drilling like this, and then they used technology to find each other. And one would pull casing, one would push casing. They created a pipeline underneath the Congo River because they didn't want to contaminate the water, so they drill under it and go below it and cased it and cemented it so it's safe and this and that. And I remember one night, I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. We had to shut down because of a lightning storm. So here I am on an offshore platform on the Congo River Delta, and I'm hanging out with these locals in a lightning storm, and they start telling me ghost stories about some of the witchcraft and things like that go on in the jungle villages. And I'm telling you, the hairs on my arm are standing up, and I'm the lightning, and he's telling me about voodoo witchcraft, and I was like, this is so awesome. I'll never forget it.
That's awesome.
It's an experience.
It's definitely an experience. It's like going on a cruise. You're in a confined space in the middle of the ocean, nothing around, and the crew is made up of 50 different nationalities, and then
Oh yeah.
the passengers themselves. You have, depending on the cruise, 3,100 to 5,000 passengers that are from 40 different countries. And then you're there in the space and everybody gets along. It's so weird. People are nice to each other no matter where they're from. And
it's a miracle.
It is a miracle. It's like they interact, and the cruise companies really push that community togetherness. And it's like, wow, what if that just expanded off and drifted right off the ship to everything around it?
Makes you realize how silly things like war really are. It's a tragedy. It's a crime against all of humanity that we're still fighting and stuff. And
that's what that was what I was really impressed with, was the way that you helped the reader gain more empathy, and you didn't dismiss war as, you showed it for what it was, and the awful, the atrocities that happen along the way.
Yeah.
You didn't glamorize it. It was really good. It was really real to life, with the fantasy twist in it, of course. But yeah, I was just so well done and enjoyable to read that you just couldn't put it down.
Um, I'm flattered. I'm very happy that you enjoyed it. Thank you. I hope other readers enjoy it too.
Oh, I'm
We've
sure
got,
they will.
I think, 20 something reviews right now. We could use a few more, but absolutely, I love to hear people enjoying it. So that's good. That's good. I'm looking forward to seeing what people think about the sequel. It's going to be a little different. It really gets away from the military stuff. That battle is won, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the war is not over. The battle's over, but the war's not. And so the quest that you know about is when that really starts to kick off. The goddess and John and them. They're going to go off on this quest, and they go into Central America and Mexico, and it really goes more towards the traditional urban fantasy, even though it's still set in a science fiction setting. So I'm hoping the readers play along. I hope they aren't disappointed that there's not as much military stuff in it. It's more personal. It's just that group of heroes and the things that they encounter, and it's a growing process for the characters too, because even at the end of the first book here, they're all still kind of innocent, starry-eyed revolutionaries, and they have more learning and more growing to do, and not all of it's going to be fun for them. They're gonna learn some hard things along the way, but that's what makes us grow up.
Definitely. Yeah, you hit on some really good points with genetic engineering too. So I really enjoyed it.
Cool.
Social
Very cool.
issues, everything. It's all in there. Well, thank you so
Outstanding.
much for joining us today and taking time away from the oil field to be here.
Yeah, I'm thankful I had a coworker that I was able to grab and go, here, answer the phones for 2 hours. I'll be right back. I promise. So.
That's great. All right. And the next book will be out how soon?
The next book will be out in like 2 weeks.
Oh, yes.
3 weeks tops, and it's called To Rule in Hell. It's got Lucy on the cover. It's brilliant. I'm so pleased with it, and we've got like I told you, we're going a little bit more urban fantasy leaning. So we're bringing in a very familiar element that I hope readers will enjoy. This one's got vampires in it, so it'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, definitely. Well, thanks again, and have a great day, and thanks for all you do.
Thank you, Denise. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
Me too. Until next time, keep asking questions. And if you want a really exciting read, The Goddess Gambit is definitely it. We'll see you soon.